be. But me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the Draft Prospects 101 series, your guide to some of the biggest and hottest names of the 2022 NFL Draft. We have transitioned from the quarterback position to the edge rushers, from the guys that throw the football to the guys that bag the guys that throw the football. And the edge rusher position may be the deepest in the 2022 NFL Draft class. And this guy that we're talking about could ultimately be the number one pick in the upcoming draft. I'm talking about Oregon edge rusher Kayvon Thibodeaux. And this is a guy that when I first turned on the tape, I wasn't blown away. However, the more and more I watched, the more and more I realized what kind of an untamed beast we could be dealing with here. And I must say, over my years of doing this, what I've come to realize with edge rushers, linebackers is another position, particularly where you have to be able to project, especially edge rusher, more so, I think, than any other position, is you have to be able to project. A lot of times with quarterbacks, you want to be able to see it. You know what I mean? You might be able to say to yourself, hey, this guy's got traits. We think that he could evolve into this quarterback, but you want to be able to see it. All right. With edge rushers, you don't always see it at the collegiate level, whether it be lack of playing time. This is a guy that may have switched positions. He's still raw. He's still filling out his frame, whatever the case may be. There may be some elements missing. There may be production missing, but you see the workable raw traits, and you've got to be able to project at this position. There have been guys in the past that didn't have the numbers, that didn't necessarily look the part. There were a few splashy plays here and there, but they didn't necessarily wow you with the actual production on the field. But these guys turned into studs at the next level. Why? Because people could see the raw workable traits in what those can manifest themselves into. And Kayvon Thibodeaux, for me, is another one of those guys where the numbers don't necessarily blow you away. However, the traits are there and they're undeniable. And if this guy is what he looks like he could be, he could turn into the next big thing as an edge rusher at the next level. So let's jump into Kayvon Thibodeaux and talk about what he brings to the table and why he could hear his name called first in the 2022 NFL Draft. So as you see, 6'5", 258 for Kayvon Thibodeaux, a guy that when he stepped on campus was right around 240 pounds. So he beefed and bulked himself up to a respectable damn near 260 at 6'5". This is a really good frame. As a matter of fact, let's go inside the numbers with Kayvon Thibodeaux and talk about why this is a guy that some people don't love because of the numbers and others say, to hell with the numbers. I know what my eyes see. Let's take a look at why this guy could potentially be the number one overall pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. So you look at this guy, true junior at Oregon, was the number one overall recruit out of high school in his class. And there were times where he showed you exactly why, including that first season on campus at Eugene, where he just exploded onto the scene in 2019, 14 games, which is the most he played in his career, 14 tackles for loss. The 9 sacks, though, they jump out and bite you because that's a number that gets you excited, you salivate, and then you wait for him to replicate that, and he never really does the remainder of his career. But that taste that you got in 19 and the flashes that you see in 20 and 21, they're enough for you to feel like, hey, this guy has it. So the forced fumble, no fumble recoveries, 3 pass breakups, and a blocked kick. And what you get a lot of times early in guys' careers is that they play on special teams. They're not the guy when they show up on campus that doesn't play special teams. So you get blocked kicks and things of that nature. It's good to know that he can do that. He may be able to do that at the next level. In 2020, again, it was a really disjointed year for everyone with COVID, and not any different for Kayvon Thibodeaux. Only 7 games for Oregon, and every school was different in terms of the amount of games they played. 9.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Obviously, that number comes way down with he only played in half of the games that he played in his freshman year. No forced fumbles, 3 pass breakups again, so you like to see him get his hands up in the passing lane. Can't get to the quarterback, get your hands up, still affect the play. But then you get to 2021. I hated the fact that he missed the Ohio State game, but, you know, it is what it is. He had an ankle injury that he sustained very early on in the season, missed the following 2 weeks. That one of those games was the game on the schedule against Ohio State. They ultimately went on the road and beat the Buckeyes, but he did not play. Would have loved to have seen him play in that game there, but 12 tackles for loss in 11 games, 7 sacks. So kind of got back to that freshman year in the sack category, but still not that overwhelming season that you saw from Chase Young, that you saw from the Bozas, that you saw from guys that ultimately were the -- 1 pick in the draft. You know, these are more Jadeveon Clowney-esque type numbers, but at the end of the day, it's still respectable. It's not like he had 3 sacks this past year in 11 games, but 2 forced fumbles, 1 pass breakup. So the numbers don't jump out at you. And I think that's one of the things that people who aren't on the Kayvon Thibodeaux bandwagon like to continue to point out is that, hey, this guy didn't really produce at a high level. He's no Boza. He's no, Chase Young. And my rebuttal to that is, no, he's not those guys, especially from a production standpoint. But what he is he's more explosive than all of those guys. He's more explosive than either of the Bozas. He's more explosive than Chase Young. That first step is lightning quick. That get off is scary even. And so when you put some of these things that you see with him together, these numbers, yeah, they're underwhelming. I mean, there were seasons where, Nick Boza or Chase Young had 14, 15, 16, 17 sacks in one season. This guy had 19 for his career. So the numbers don't jump out at you. They don't wow you. Only 3 forced fumbles in his career. So even when he does get to the quarterback, he's not, producing big-time, game-changing plays. But there's a lot here to tap into. And that's where we find ourselves as we transition to his pros. And this is what gets people excited about Kayvon Thibodeaux. His frame. Yeah, that's where you start at 6'5", 258. This guy could easily get to 265 if he wants to, and not lose an ounce of speed, quickness, or athleticism. You can't teach 6'5", you know what I mean? And he's got that. So his frame is one that gets you excited. The size and length, as I mentioned, the 6'5", but the length is what is really something that I think he uses really well. I think his ability to lay hands on the tackle first, engage, and get up under their pads and drive them back. His ability to go STP, speed to power, is uncanny. We'll get to that in a second, but his length is something that he uses well, and it's a really big part of the package that you get with Kayvon Thibodeaux. Athleticism and explosiveness. I think that athletically, he's not as comfortable out in space as you would like him to be. Like, some of his traits that you see remind you of several guys. Like, for instance, with his explosiveness, I see a lot of Joe Tryon last year out of UW that ultimately was drafted back into the first round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Really explosive edge rusher that could bend, get around the corner. You see a little bit of that, similar size to Kayvon Thibodeaux, but he was he being Joe Tryon, much more comfortable out in space. That is not really what Kayvon Thibodeaux is, but he's a good athlete, but his explosiveness, I think his number 1 trait is his explosiveness. This guy is twitchy as they come. And I think that's the thing that gets you the most excited, because not only can he win with that speed off the edge and that explosiveness off the snap, but he can take that explosiveness and convert it into power. And it is raw, unfiltered, dangerous, combustible, explosive power. And it all comes from the explosiveness in his lower half, honestly speaking. Can bend, corner, plus shorten the edge. So his bend isn't DeMarcus Ware bend, where he's literally, ducking under tackles, but he can bend enough. You're a 6'6" tackle. You're not looking to have to bend at all. And this guy can duck, bend the corner. He can shorten that edge. That's the most important thing for a rusher, is If you can't shorten the edge, 7.5, 8 yards max, turn that corner, no one's afraid of you. Okay, if you're turning the corner at 9, 10 yards, guess what? Quarterback's going to step up in the pocket, or that tackle's going to push you around the pocket, and life goes on. Okay, but if you can find a way to get to that quarterback at 7, 7.5, 8, 8.5 yards, turn the corner at that point, flatten to the quarterback, you got something. And that's what this guy can do, is shorten that edge, make it tough on the quarterback to just step up and avoid. And some of that has to do with the fact that he can bend that corner. Makes good use of his hands. So a lot of times with these college pass rushers, you don't get guys that use their hands well. They're just there. You know, they're part of their frame, but they're not using them to their full extent. And I think a lot of times with college pass rushers, that's the last thing that they learn, or, you know, even getting into the NFL, that's one of the things they have to develop, is how to use their hands. He uses his hands well. He makes good use. He's not the Bozas. I've always said they're the gold standard. They coming out of Ohio State, they use their hands the best I've ever seen of pass rushers coming into the NFL. However, he does a really good job, he being Thibodeaux, of at the top of his rush, when that tackle's looking to engage and push him around or latch on, he does a great job of using his hands to defeat that block, either knock down the hands of the tackle or use that to engage himself and then disengage and propel himself towards the quarterback. His hands aren't just there at the end of his frame. He's actually utilizing them, and they help him generate pressure on the quarterback. Speaking of his hands, man, are they violent and heavy, especially in the run game. This is absolutely apparent when he's getting after the running back in the run game, where he's defeating blockers, whether it's a tight end that he's shedding or a tackle that he's just destroying. His hands are heavy, they are violent, and they allow him to be a very good defender in the run game. And I think a lot of times when you see really good run defenders that are pass rushers, it's because they have violent, heavy hands. The best example of this is Khalil Mack. When he came into the league, he didn't have huge, gaudy, numbers sack-wise that first year. But what he initially established right out of the gate was that you weren't running to his side. And I remember his hands being among the most violent I had seen of a collegiate player making the jump and transition into the NFL. When he came out of Buffalo, his hands were already grown man NFL certified. And that's why you can't run to his side of the football field. And Thibodeaux has a lot of that in him as well. Convert speed to power. I talked about the STP. It's legit, man. It's after his fastball, which is his explosiveness off the line. The STP is really his best move, honestly, because right now he's not a big, tool bag guy. He doesn't have a lot in his toolbox. But what he does have is raw ability, speed, and then the ability to convert speed to power is amazing. And honestly, if you can convert speed to power and you've got people afraid of your explosiveness, it's a deadly combination, because now they don't know which is coming. If you do a good enough job of setting it up, really, that's all you need if you understand how to use it. And he destroyed some guys in college, tight ends, tackles, all alike, by converting that speed to power. It's a lethal combination, and Thibodeaux definitely took advantage of that. Physical and decisive in the run game. Talked about the heavy, violent hands, and you see that in the run game especially. And he's decisive. When he jumps inside, he's inside. When he decides, I'm going around this guy, he goes around him. When he decides, I'm going inside, I'm taking an inside rush, there's no hesitation, he's going. When he defeats a block, he gets to the ball carrier straight away. So he's physical and he's decisive. Sometimes that decisiveness can be a hindrance and counterproductive. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But for the most part, you love what he brings to the table, not only as a pass rusher, but also in the run game as a run defender. Quality motor. Now, this was something that was challenged early on in this process. And look, it's lion season. I've talked about this for years. This is the time of the year where you believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man, Louie T. You know what the rules are to the game, then play. So teams are going to, float things out there. And, there's always an agenda this time of the year. If you want Kayvon Thibodeaux and you're sitting there at number 3, guess what? You float out there that, hey, I don't think this guy's motor is all that great. Yeah. You try to pull the man's draft stock down so that he falls into your lap. Nobody's buying the hype. You watch the tape, you see that this guy's motor is plenty good enough. Yeah, sure, there's a couple of plays. He's on the backside loafing. Look, what I've learned over the years with defenders in particular is you got to conserve energy. There are certain plays where you need to go balls to the wall, and then there are certain plays where they run away from you, and it doesn't seem. Now, this is the thing that gets tricky because you think a play's over, it's not coming your way, you start jogging, guy cuts it back, you could have been there, you're not, now it goes for 63 yards, and they're looking at you like, what the hell were you doing when they turn on the tape? That said, though, there are times where you need to bust your ass to try to get over there, and then there are times where you just conserve energy so that you can stay on the field. And I think you see him do that from time to time. I never looked at this guy and said, man, his motor just runs hot and cold. I didn't see that. So I think his motor is quality, and I don't have any qualms in that department. And then finally, versatility and upside. So the versatility piece stems from Oregon's, ability to just move him around. This guy stood up. He can play in a 3-4 defense as an outside backer. He can play in a 4-3 defense with his hand in the dirt. I think he would need to maybe put on a few more pounds to do that, to be a little bit more stout, but he can do both. 4-3, 3-4, he's versatile enough to play in either and be interchangeable. This is a guy that they reduced inside at times and used him as a rusher inside. This is a guy also that they dropped into coverage. I didn't love him in coverage. We'll talk more about that here in a second, but he did that as well. So the versatility is definitely there, and he's scheme diverse. 4-3, 3-4, doesn't matter. He can do both. Hand in the dirt, standing up in the 2-point stance, he can do both. Upside is clearly here because the guy, he's a young pup. He's, breath is smelling like Similac. He's wet behind the ears. He has no idea what he's doing, and yet you feel like this guy could come in and wreck shop right away. So the upside is through the roof, and that's why people look at this guy as potentially the number 1 overall, not just pick, but the overall player in this upcoming spring's draft. So we go from his pros to his cons. So for me, he needs more of a rush plan. And this is not uncommon with young pass rushers coming from college to the NFL. It's rare that you get a young pass rusher that actually has a plan that's setting up tackles. I don't see him setting guys up. I see him just looking to be a bulldog in a china shop, a bull in a china shop, where he's just looking to just go 110 miles an hour, use a bull rush to get there. If he can beat you with speed around the corner, he'll beat you with that. You come with late hands, he'll swat him down and defeat the block. But I didn't see much of a plan. I didn't see a guy going hard outside, coming back inside with a crossover. I didn't see long arm of the law, one arm pole vault, or as I like to say, long arm of the law. I didn't see a guy taking a tackle, setting him up hard outside with a spin back to the inside, getting him off balance. He opens up the door, he goes inside. You didn't see any of that. So I think he needs to have more of a pass rush plan. I don't think he has that right now. But again, that's not uncommon. 90% of pass rushers coming from college, no matter what the talent level is, 90% of them don't have a pass rush plan when they get to the NFL. That's something that they develop over time. Be more disciplined / over aggression. What you will find is that this guy wants to make plays. Who doesn't? And you can get him to bite on a bootleg. You can get him to bite on read option and get him out of position. And he's so aggressive in the run game that you can get him to bite on a fake run and get outside of him. And so, and I watched it multiple times in the same game. They run the same play and he falls for it 3 times. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, at what point do you realize this is what they're trying to do to you? Like, they're exploiting you. You have to understand you got to stay home. Wide receiver screen, you don't get blocked. It's not that easy, right? Like, how often is it that you just aren't blocked on a play? And so they're inviting you up the field because they're looking to get rid of it quickly and get up the field. And so these are things you'd like to see him be a little bit more aware of, be a little bit more disciplined on the edge. But he's an aggressive player, and this tends to happen with aggressive players from time to time. Be more aware away from the line of scrimmage. So, there were times where Oregon would drop him in coverage, and obviously he's not as effective away from the line of scrimmage as he is at the line of scrimmage. But, this is a part of being an edge rusher. It doesn't matter what level you play at, you're going to drop into coverage from time to time. There's no avoiding it. And so what I want to see from him, and I'm nitpicking here, when you start talking about stuff like this, it means there's not a lot here, right, with this guy. But when you drop into coverage, you want to see a guy be aware of what's happening. Look, he's not a linebacker, right? He's not dropping into coverage on 40% of the snaps. So this isn't something he's accustomed to doing, but still, I don't want you just dropping to a patch of grass and saying, hey, I did my job. I need you to understand where the tight end is, if he's sitting down, if a crosser's coming. I need you to see the action going on and respond accordingly. He just drops to and he doesn't look as fluid, like I talked about with Joe Tryon, who looked comfortable in space. He doesn't look as comfortable in space. Doesn't look like he knows what's going on. Hey, I'm dropping to my patch of grass. Ball's completed like literally 2 yards away from him to his inside, and he doesn't even see the tight end sitting down. On 3rd and 5, he sits down at 5 yards, and you drop to 6 yards of depth, and you don't even acknowledge the tight end. Like, where do you think the quarterback's going with the football? So these are the types of things. Again, I'm nitpicking. He's a defensive end. You know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't something he'll be asked to do on a consistent basis. But when he is asked to do it, I'd like to see him be a little bit more aware. And then finally, the lack of high-end collegiate production, we've talked about it. It's not something that I really want to harp on too much because it is what it is. We've seen guys not have tremendous collegiate, production and then tear it up at the NFL level. And the guy that I'm going to comp him to is a great example. He was kind of a late bloomer, raw, all the athleticism, size, everything you could ask for. But the numbers just, they didn't move the needle at all. And gets to the NFL, all those traits that everyone talked about came to fruition, and he started tearing things up. And so that takes me to my player comp, and it's Danielle Hunter. And I see so much of Danielle Hunter in Kayvon Thibodeaux. I mean, they're literally the same size. Danielle Hunter is about 6'5", 260. Kayvon Thibodeaux's 6'5", 258. So essentially the same exact size, same length. You can see Thibodeaux put on muscle. He's not as big and rock solid as Danielle Hunter, but he's not that far off either. Hunter was so raw coming out of LSU, and I think he might have had 4.5 sacks or something like that in his career. Like, it wasn't a big number, but you could see the explosiveness. You could see the power, but you just didn't know if it would all come together or not. It did for Danielle Hunter. Another guy that I thought about, but the frame just isn't the same, is Odafe Oweh in last year's draft. Here's a guy that the Ravens took a chance on in the first round. All the workable traits. This guy destroyed his pro day. You could see it on film. Like, this guy is as explosive as it gets. Just a lean frame. Not a lot of numbers at Penn State, but you saw the edge potential with Odafe Oweh. And then he gets to the NFL, his rookie season with the Ravens, he tears it up. And you're like, man, this guy didn't have the numbers, didn't have the production, but you saw the explosiveness and the ability to turn speed into power and what he could potentially be. And I see a lot of that in Kayvon Thibodeaux, but just a different frame. His frame is more Danielle Hunter than it is Odafe Oweh. But, man, I know why people are excited about Kayvon Thibodeaux. I wasn't initially, but I am on board because what I've seen with guys like Odafe Oweh, like Danielle Hunter over the years is that you can't just go off of production. And if the talent is there, especially as an edge rusher, and they get the proper coaching, that guy could turn out to be something special. So Kayvon Thibodeaux, I think, has the ability. Now he's got to put it to good use at the next level. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Draft Prospects 101 series in Kayvon Thibodeaux. We will continue with the edge rushers. There are so many of these guys. I could go on and on, but we'll try to keep it to a reasonable number of these guys so we can get to some other positions. But this may be the guy that you hear come off the board first. He's going to have some competition. It's not a foregone conclusion, but Kayvon Thibodeaux is definitely going to hear his name sooner rather than later in the 2022 NFL Draft. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Until next time, you guys take care and have a good one.